This morning, I want to share with you some things. Within my job, working for the Internal Revenue Service, I deal with all the security needs of the IRS. Just not the needs of just the Jacksonville office now. I'm now in charge of all of the offices in Puerto Rico, Florida, and also North Carolina. So there's roughly about 40-something buildings. Also roughly about in Puerto Rico, we're building another 8 new sites coming on board in Puerto Rico. So as we're building a facility, as you know, what we have here is like a set of floor plans. On the floor plans, you have to design the security around the facility and what you're trying to protect and the assets that you're trying to protect. People, government property, and so forth. Within the federal government, there are what we call ISC standards. ISC is an interagency security committee that the government created after 9/11 to try to make sure that all the government facilities are standardized in what security that's being installed to protect the government assets. And within my work, we have each building has a certain level, a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, a level 4, and a level 5. The higher the level, the more security that has to be placed at that facility. There are only a few level 5 facilities within the Internal Revenue Service. Those would be like 1111 Constitution, which is where all the high level executives are located at. Majority of the buildings that I deal with are anywhere from a level 2 to a level 4. And within that, you have a structure. We have a minimum, what we call a minimum security standards. Each and every facility, if it's a level 2, there is a minimum level of security that has to be installed within those facilities. Within life, everything has standards. I know within Boone, in the prison, there were standards that, hey, in order to shoot a gun, you had to accomplish a certain standard. The standard is always here. If you lower the standards, then things can happen. The same way within the federal government and what I do. If I lower the standards, then that means that you're not as protected properly. So there is a minimum security. That means this is what is required for you to do. And then as I was thinking, of course, things at Boone, usually we do this right here. If you don't know what this is, this right here. I know, Terry, we talked about this the other day. This right here, it means how many times have we heard this before? So if I get on something in that, just start doing this right here. But this lesson today mostly is try to make things simple, straightforward. This is what is required. And then whenever you went to look at, well, what is life standards? What are the standards that you as an individual need to live by? And that's where, as far as defining what life standards are, well, if I can get my mouse in that to work. The definition of life, or standard of life, is really the necessities, comforts, and luxuries enjoyed or aspired to by an individual or group. Again, the necessities, the comforts, the luxuries, these are what is the requirement, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary.com. Then in life today, we're going to look at 3 different viewpoints. Man's view, God's view, and Christ's view whenever it comes to standards. Man's view in Colossians chapter 3, verse 5 to 9. Paul writes, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourself of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices. Man's view: here, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, greed. All these things are man's view of life standards. Anger: hey, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get it. Malice, slander, filthy language. You see all those things in man's life. He also says Paul says in Titus chapter 3, verse 3, at one time we too were foolish, disobedient, deceived, and enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasure. We lived in malice and envy, being hated and hating one another. Again, what are man's thoughts and desires? Being foolish, disobedient, deceiving, enslaving, pleasures, passions, malice, envy. Again, Ecclesiastes 2, verse 1 to 3. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. My mind still guided me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their life. Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, one of the wisest men, really the wisest man that ever lived this earth. Again, his thing was, hey, let's test it. Let's find out what are all those pleasures in life. Verse 4 to 7 and 9. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. And then it goes on, his last statement says, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. Here Solomon says he did all those things. He built houses. He planted vineyards, parks, fruit trees, all these things that we normally do in our normal life. But for him, he was like the greatest of the greatest. And then chapter 2, verse 11 in Ecclesiastes. Yet when I surveyed all that my hand had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. Nothing. So what's man's view? Do whatever it takes to get ahead. He who has the gold makes the rules. That's true in life. You only live once in your life, so grab all the gusto you can get. But Solomon at the very end says it's all meaningless. You have to put things into perspective. What's God's standards? I had what was read earlier was Exodus chapter 20, verse 1 to 6. This is where God gave the 10 Commandments to the Israelites for them to follow. He says, and God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall not have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven or on the earth beneath or in the waters below, you shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Here God's standards is to make no other gods. Don't create something to say, hey, this is my God. He says to keep his commandments. These are some of the requirements. And he goes on, verse 7 to the 11, he says, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, or your daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Again, this following says, honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land and the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servants, his oxen or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. These are all standards that God is setting up for the Israelites. 10 simple commandments. 10 simple. But again, God expected perfection. This is his standard. Then in Psalm chapter 37, verse 3 to 9, God's standard is to trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from the wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope is in the Lord will inherit the land. All these things is written to trust and do good, always do good. The Lord there wants to give you the desires of your heart, but you need to commit your ways to the Lord. So what is God's view about life standards? Put him first. Keep his commandments. Keep the Sabbath day holy. These were his requirements. Honor your parents. Don't misuse the name of the Lord. Don't lie, steal, murder, and cheat on your spouse. These are all standards that God really wanted and set before the children of Israel. But we know that those standards we couldn't live up to. We knew we were going to fall short in any one sin. So what did we need? We need Christ's view. Christ said, a question was posed to Christ there in Matthew chapter 22, verse 36 to 40. It says, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment of the law? Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. And when you stop to think about it, if you put the Lord first, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That means that your entire being, each and every one of us, has a mind, a soul, and a heart. If you do all these things, and then love your neighbor as yourself, you're not going to do any harm to yourself. So why would you want to do harm to your neighbor? And who is that neighbor? Neighbor could be anybody, a complete stranger. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 to 14, Paul says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If you have a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." Paul gives us the perfect example of what life standards should be about: having compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, but most of all, says to put on love. Love overcomes a lot of things in life. Colossians 3:15 to 17 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your heart, and whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." Again, Paul reminds us to be thankful, to teach and admonish, share the things that you know with those that you love. But most important, whenever you do something, do it all in the name of the Lord. Do it your best, not just part of the way, but do it your best. And then always giving thanks to the God the Father through him. And then in Titus chapter 3:14, it says, "Our people must learn to devote themselves to doing what is good, in order to provide for urgent need and not live unproductive lives." What is Christ's view? We should be doing what is good and not to be unproductive. Christ says to love God with all your heart, love your neighbor. Paul says to have compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, to be thankful, and to do what is good. All these things, we have man's view, we have God's view, and we have Christ's view. And I want to sum it all up with a final statement here from Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Paul again tells us as Christians, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." What are the standards that are within your life? Do they meet up to man's point of view? Do they meet up to God's point of view? Or do they meet up to Christ's point of view and the apostles? Each and every week that we gather together, we always remind ourselves, what is it that is important for us today? Are we living up to those standards that are set before us that we've read here today? If we haven't, and we know that we haven't, and we want to be buried with Christ and be baptized, to be raised out of that watery grave, a new person, to rededicate our lives back to what we know is the right way of living. We also may need prayers that, hey, I've taken the steps of being baptized, but I know that I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I need prayers. I need help. The help is here. The help is in God's Word. And it's through reading and knowing and studying and prayer that we gain further acknowledge and appreciation. If there's anyone here today that's subject to that call of invitation, come forward as we stand and sing the song of invitation.